God, thank you for today. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for making yourself known. Thank you for making it so that we can all have a relationship with you, God, and that it could be a personal and intimate one. That's such an awesome and special thing, and it's great to get to praise you for that. I thank you for the people in this room, that they're seeking you, God, with their hearts and their minds. I just pray that you guide us on this journey, and that we draw closer to you in the process. We love you, Lord, and pray this in your name. Amen. All right. This week, actually, before I get started, one minor thing I just wanted to fix. Last week, I was talking about, in passing, when the New Testament was written. If you remember, I said about 33 AD is about when we put Jesus died. And I said the New Testament was written in between 33 and 70 AD. That's my opinion, just so you know. There's debate on when it was written, but nobody puts any of the New Testament letters past 80. So if you want to amend that to 33 and 80, some people might be like, well, I think this book, one of the later books like Revelation or some of the later written ones, may be getting in the mid-70s somewhere, but nobody dates them past 80. So in case that gets brought up, which it hasn't, and I'm not saying it because I got called out, but just thought to be honest so that you know it's my opinion that none of the books were written before 70. So take that for what you will. Anyway, moving on. We're going to do the cosmological argument today, which is actually a pretty fun one. I like it. I will kind of put a little caveat in. I think the cosmological argument is a really strong argument. There's a lot of good reasoning behind it, and it makes sense, and I like it. I think it works. The one issue that you'll have is if you're talking to someone of like an atheistic worldview or perspective, you're talking about scientific data. And like I said, one of the main problems I have with arguing about scientific facts or things like that is it tends to be up for argument. Some of the facts tend to be a little, well, I see it this way, and they'll conclude things, but they'll argue over the conclusion. So it isn't, the facts are kind of set in stone, like this is what it took for this to happen, but they kind of argue over how it happened, if that makes sense. And so I like the cosmological argument, but it's never my first go-to thing, coming out of the gates, because if someone knows a lot of science, they'll tend to just start arguing about peripheral things. And I hate talking about the peripherals, getting sidetracked, talking about little things, and that sometimes tends to happen with this. So that's why it's not the first one we talked about. That's why it's not the first one I talk about. But I think it's a really strong argument. So here's what it is. It's an argument for God by observing the cosmos, or for the existence of God. If you don't know, cosmos is just a universe, is another term for that. But I say cosmos, so I like showing where words come from. It tends to make things different. So cosmological, so the study of the cosmos, of the universe, study of how we got here, cosmos, universe, same thing, if that's making sense. So it's through observing the universe, where we live, the world, how we got here, that we can say, okay, well, we're arguing that God exists because I look at this thing, or how we got here, how this happened, and surely that must prove that we were created, that there is a God, that there's something else going on other than just, matter randomly, plus a lot of time, and plus this crazy accident chance. The basic principle of the argument is that the universe it's so complex. It's vast, it's complex, it's so intricate and so finely tuned, and we're going to flesh out what finely tuned is, what we mean by that. But it's so finely tuned that the only really logical explanation is, hey, there's got to be something starting this. There's got to be something that's going, okay, we're putting it together. Because the chances of it just happening on accident are astronomical, pun intended, if you got that one. But here's the deal. Atheism, they say, as we've been saying throughout the whole class, they'll go, okay, we got here, existence as we know it, the universe, the cosmos as we know it, happened because of this crazy explosion. There's all this matter that was eternally existent. There's an accidental explosion, so a chance. And then over millions and millions of years, over lots and lots of time, we got here. And that's how everything we know is. Now, the cosmological argument goes, wait a second, when we look at some of the aspects that it took for us to get here, some of the things that had to be fine-tuned, it kind of tends to point to not just an accident. Because when we look at, and we'll look at a couple things, and I'm not going to cover all of them because there's lots and lots of different examples. So I'm just going to give you a couple just to give you an idea of what we mean and an idea of the principle. And if you want to dig further, the resources page I have, again, that book by John Lennox, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, Dr. John Lennox, does a lot of this really, really well. There's a lot of other ones. Case for a Creator is another pretty good book that will go over some of the facts. Trying to think if I can... My brain's not on. There's more, but that's the only two that popped into my head at the moment, so I can give you more later. But in the book, The God's Undertaker, which is the one by John Lennox, he gives some ideas, some examples of like just how incredible the chances of us getting here or the universe itself getting here is. Let me read a little excerpt from it. This is from God's Undertaker. He says, "This is the kind of accuracy a marksman would need to hit a coin on the far side of the observable universe, which is 20 billion light years away, which is easy to write down but pretty unfathomable to actually comprehend. If we find that difficult to imagine," here's what he's going to say, "a further illustration suggested by astrophysicist Hugh Ross may help." So he's saying the chances of us getting here are this. This is what he's going to flesh out. He says, cover America with coins in a column. So you're stacking them bit by bit that reach from the ground, so from Earth to the moon. So each column goes ground to moon and coins, and you're covering North America in that. So huge. So you're going to cover America with coins in the column reaching to the moon, which is about 236,000 miles away, in case you wanted to know how big that column is. Huge. Then do the same thing with a billion other continents, not a million, billion. Okay, so now we're talking about worlds on top of worlds on top of worlds, and you're covering all the land in coins, and not just like one coin, like a column of coins that starts at the ground, goes 236,000 miles up to the moon. So that's how high the columns are. Again, crazy. So do the same thing with a billion continents, and you're going to take one coin out of all that, all those billions and billions and billions of coins, take one coin and paint it red. You're going to put it somewhere, anywhere in one of the billion continents, in one of the piles, anywhere in the pile. Then you're going to blindfold one of your friends and say, hey, I want you to pick out a coin. The chances of your friend, blindfolded, going to one of the billion continents, finding the exact right coin that was painted red, and anywhere in a pile that is 236,000 miles high, spanning the entire continent of America, the chances of them finding that red coin the first try is the same chances, which would be about 1 in 10 to the 40th power, which is the same chance. So if you're wondering, it's 1 in 10 to the 40th is what that looks like, which basically that 40 is just telling you how many zeros come out at the end, which is insane. 1 in 10 to the 40th power that they will, which is the same odds of just the electromagnetic force constant. I don't know what that means, by the way, but he does, so just take his word for it. The electromagnetic force constant to the gravitational force constant being balanced in just the right way so that large stars could come into existence. That's just for large stars. That's the chance. Nothing else. We're not talking about the axis of the Earth being tilted just right. We're not talking about carbon life forms being able to exist on Earth itself and how we got here. We're not talking about anything else except large stars coming to existence. That's the chance, which is insane. And now here's the crazy part. If you know anything about the universe, there's not just large stars. Our sun isn't a large star. I think it's a medium, if I remember correctly. So you have to have large stars, medium, and small stars in the universe. And you're just talking about large stars. That's the chances for just that one thing to explode and happen, which is basically unfathomable. And you're going, okay. And this is what the cosmological argument hinges on. We're going, that is insane, and an insane chance. Okay, so you have to take the chance of that happening just right, plus the chances just right for a small star. So you're adding even more onto this number. Then the chances for medium stars, which makes that number even more, plus the chances for, Earth and carbon life to be able to exist as it does. Plus, you're talking about the access of the Earth. If the Earth was, I think it's within an inch either way from where it is currently placed, an inch towards the sun, the world would be too hot for us to exist or for life to exist. If it was an inch away, it'd be too cold and it'd be basically a big frozen tundra everywhere, and we still wouldn't be able to exist. I mean, the chances of all these things happening they're insurmountable. It doesn't really make sense. And so people look at this and they go, someone had to be tweaking it. Because you keep adding more and more numbers, more and more zeros to this chance. The more we study stuff, the more we find out how intricate life is. You just keep adding more and more and more and more. And we're going like, can you not see that at least there's something else going on beyond what a crazy chance? Because it's not just a crazy chance, it's an insane chance, is what it is. There's a famous title basically for this argument that came out a while ago called The Blind Watchmaker. And you'll hear a bunch of different kind of takes on this, on the blind watchmaker. It's an illustration. It got pretty famous, I think in the 1800s, if I'm remembering correctly. And it just really nicely sums up the cosmological argument. Actually, sorry, it was 1700s. The man's name was William Paley in the 1700s, who kind of came up with this. The illustration goes like this. When you take a watch, so you have a nice pocket watch or a wristwatch, whatever, if you open up the back, you look at it and you see all the cogs, right? And they're interconnected, and there's different size, so they're smaller and bigger, and they each have a purpose, and they're all turning, but they're all working perfectly and turning together at the same time, so that, the little hands are doing this just right, and you can wind it, and it'll, but it keeps time. And you look in the back, and you're going, this all is fit. This all makes sense. Each piece looks like it was placed there for a purpose. It looks like it was on purpose. It all works together really well. Basically, it goes, you don't open up the back of a watch and go, man, that's crazy. There must have been a weird explosion in the watch factory, and it happened and turned into this watch. Like, nobody says that, because that's insane. That's stupid. He's saying it's the same thing with the universe. When you look at the universe, when we crack it open and we're studying it through science, and we see all the parts of it just going together perfectly for how it got here, and the chances of it happening are just outstanding, why do we then go, what an awesome accident, instead of going, this looks like it was made? Because it's put together so well, the chances of it not being put together are actually more than the chances that they are, which is kind of incredible. Even if you did have all the parts of the watch, let's just pretend. You had all the cogs, you had all the face and the arms, is that what they're called? Hands? Which hands? Okay, sorry. Brain's not in, I told you. The hands and everything, even if you had all the parts necessary for the watch and you put it in a box and you just shook it, you still wouldn't get a watch, even if you shook it 1,000,000 times. But that's the argument. Well, eventually it would come together. But the chances of it, way to go, I erased it. There it is. The chances of it happening are far beyond 1 in 10 to the 40th, which was just the chances, remember, for large stars to appear. I mean, it goes more. The amount of times that would have to take would be, you can't count that. It's insane. A similar argument I've heard, it's basically a take on the blind watchmaker, is the printing press analogy. Someone will say the chances of the universe just exploding and happening the way it is the exact same chances of there being an explosion in a printing press and you get Webster's dictionary. Perfect. I mean, think about that. That's really the same chances. No one just is like, oh, the ink exploded and landed on all the pages and the binding, and and then it came together to make sense. It was cohesive. It didn't just come together as a book. It came together as like a cohesive book, and not just any book, but Webster's dictionary, which explains every word really that we know. That's insane. And that's the cosmological argument. Now, it holds a lot of sway. I think it does. But like I said, I usually refrain from using it purely because it was kind of widely believed to be disproved one science. We've talked about at the beginning the God of the gaps theory. Well, we just didn't understand it. And yes, we know it's a crazy chance. We understand that, but you're still using God to just explain the things we don't know. So we don't know exactly, how all these parts fit together just right or how the explosion happened. So you're just saying, oh, there must be a God because you're too weak in your mind, you're too weak intellectually to go, okay, there must have been somebody, orchestrating this. And the amazing thing is that it's actually come back even more with the progression of science. This has actually come to be kind of more viable than it even was 10, 20 years ago. I mean, it was a good argument. It still remains a good argument. But like I said, if you know anything about Richard Dawkins, really famous professor out of Oxford, he is kind of the purveyor for the new atheist. If you're familiar with that, it's just a movement of secular humanism, atheists, all the same things. But he's kind of the forefront of that. He goes around, actually John Lennox is the main guy that goes around debating him, so if you ever want to hear some fun debates, listen to them. He kind of came up with this thing called the flying spaghetti monster, and a couple ways to kind of disprove this whole, it's a crazy chance, and people kind of took it, the scientific community especially kind of took it as this blind watchmaker thing's kind of stupid. But now sitting on the other side, when we've progressed further with physics, we know a lot more about the beginning of the universe. We found that the universe is expanding. We found things about, we can kind of trace the rate at which it's expanding a little bit. We're discovering more about physics and the complexity of the world, and they're going, this is just becoming more and more clear. And actually, the blind watchmaker argument is kind of renewed itself. It's kind of come back, and people are going, there's even more crazy chances than we knew 10, 20 years ago. And this stuff is outstanding. And you're seeing a lot more sway, which I think is really cool. I do want to say this argument, it's not my forte. I told you I'm not. Science isn't exactly like my big, area that I go and study. If you like science, more power to you. I mean, study it, learn it, get good at it. Don't stop just because I'm it's just, I haven't done math since high school. So. I didn't have math in college, by the way, which was awesome. But so that's one of the things. Excuse me. A big thing that has kind of brought this back is also the mapping of DNA, which I believe I mentioned a while ago, but really cool stuff. As I said, the director of the Human Genome Project, which is this project set up where they're going, hey, we're going to map out all of the human DNA. We're going to try and figure out what all it takes, look at all the different proteins, how it's stacked together, find out the code. That's the Human Genome Project. The director is actually a professing Christian, and he actually holds it to the fact that he started researching this whole DNA thing. He looked at it and he goes, it is so complex. It's so crazy. It's so intricate that just saying it evolved and it all started with an accident, that can't be right. And he's a Christian, and he's the head. So when I talk about science, I know it seems like sometimes we're saying it's like us versus science. It's Christians versus science. It's not the truth. There's incredibly intelligent people who are leading in their fields, like the leader of the Human Genome Project. You got John Lennox, Gary Habermas, who's kind of in the historical realm. You have hundreds of others who are going, we're Christians and we're physicists. We're Christians and we're scientists. We're Christians and we're biologists, whatever it may be. So I don't want you to feel like every time someone talks about science, it's guard up, let's throw some punches, let me show you this blind watchmaker cosmological argument and start dropping everything, because that's not how it is. Science actually reaffirms a lot of the Christian faith. Yeah.
I always listen to PBS once, and I apologize for not having a memory, but I always thought, when I was young, that when they found aliens on other planets, that would kind of negate the Christian argument. But it was just this last couple months I was driving along, and they were doing that same quotient that you were doing, the chances of life on a planet, and I apologize for not writing it down and having a memory, but the chances of there being life on another planet are way less likely than we ever thought possible. And it could possibly be, this guy said, that Earth would be the only planet that has life on it, way more than we ever thought.
Yeah, that's true. And
Science that said that.
yeah, science reaffirms, actually, fun fact, when the Big Bang first came out as theory for evolution, a lot of secular scientists were in opposition to it because it sort of reaffirmed the Genesis account where God created, God started, and it spoke. Now, we hear the Big Bang and we're like, nope, like evolution, no. But at the beginning, it was, science has time and time again reaffirmed Christianity. Now, there are still things that sometimes seem in opposition, and we go, what do we do with this? But by and large, science isn't the enemy of Christianity. Anything they discover doesn't mean they disprove God. Even if there were aliens, that doesn't mean God didn't make the aliens. God is a creator. If he is who he says he is, then he made everything. So there's nothing really going to discover that goes, oh, God didn't make that. That's not really going to happen. The thing about science is this. Science is all based on observation. And I've said this before, but it's really important to distinguish that. Because observation really only goes so far. Science will look at a process. If I drop this marker and fall, they go, oh man, why did that do that? And will it do it every time? So if I do it again, can I reproduce that? I observe the marker falling, leaving my hand, hitting the floor, and we come up with the theory of gravity. And we know that because the marker falls. So we know gravity exists. We know it's real. We can start coming up with formulas. We can trace, okay, how much does the marker weigh? How fast is it falling? What's the rate? Are there formulas we can do to figure out more about the gravitational pull? Can we study the Earth and see how the size of the planet affects the gravitational pull versus the moon, where we know it's a little bit lighter, so the marker would kind of, slow down and not really fall quite as quickly, all of these things. But science is all based on observation. It says, I see this happen, I can replicate this, I can do it again. And then you make your theories and stuff off that. But the one thing it can never do is science can never give you meaning, which is really important because they're going to say, yes, it can, but it really can't. Because you're just observing something, right? So I can observe. Think about this. If I have a menu and it's got a couple of items on it, science can observe the menu, right? They can tell you the paper, what it's made out of, the fibers, what it is. It can study the ink and tell you, well, this is the composition of the ink and how it got here. And it can study how the ink is on the paper. But can it ever explain how you can know that is telling you that there's roast chicken on the menu? Not really, because science can never tell you about meaning. You can observe things. You can tell about its construction, but you can never posit a meaning because you're just observing something. That's why I tend to like philosophy, because philosophy says, all right, well, how do we know this to begin with? How can we know what we know? It goes beyond the observation, says what is meaning, what is right, what is wrong. Science isn't going to be able to tell you this for sure is right, this for sure is wrong. It's going to say, this is what we have observed people to do. This is what the majority of people do, so that might be right. This is what most people do, and we can tell you what the odd ones, that don't fit in, that they're odd. But they can never tell you, that person is worth this. That soul is worth that. You should not do this because. That's a really important distinction. And people will try to say science can give you meaning. But it's really all based on observation. I'm going to go on a huge tangent. Ignore this if you want to, but the cool thing about science is a lot of times we think when it comes to biblical accounts, when it comes to miracles, we got the Red Sea parting, there's manna coming from heaven, there's all these crazy things, people getting raised, lame people, who couldn't walk or brought up and all of a sudden they can walk. And sometimes when we get really deep into science, we're going, man, how can miracles happen? Here's the cool thing. Science is just an observation. It says this is how the world normally works. A miracle is what? Something outside of the normal, right? So it's saying we know what normal is, and a miracle actually subverted the normal. Now, science can't explain and say there can never be a miracle. They just say, let's say Jesus rising up into the heavens was a miracle, right? He floated on waves. We're like, whoa, people don't float, they don't fly, they don't walk on water, whatever it is. But all science has said, we know that when people jump into water, they don't stand on top of the surface, they bloop, they go in. And some of us more than others. But what they can't say is, well, that miracle never happened. All they can say is, we just have observed that this has never happened. That's a huge distinction. Because this doesn't explain away the miraculous. This doesn't explain away the supernatural. In fact, by its definition, supernatural means not natural, not in the natural order. So we have this system, and we're inside it, and science is subject to this system. It's saying we're observing this. This is the universe as we know it. We know how it works. But if something subverts the system, if something comes from outside, remember when we talked about transcending, when we're talking about morals and morality, if something comes from outside and comes in, that's not natural, that is supernatural, well, that allows for miracles to happen. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden this system is going haywire and things can't be the same. No, it's just saying something was outside the system and it started it. And so there can be a miracle that started the process of, the time plus chance plus matter, started creation and gave order. So it allows for that. It's really important to not let science seem like it's the head of everything, because we tend to elevate it and go like, yes, science said this and it must be true. They're going to know all. I mean, they can know a lot. They can discover how the universe works, but you can never posit meaning. Remember when we talked about morality, how do we know that a person is worth something? It's because we have something supernatural, something outside the system that comes in and says, all man is created equal. Can you really get that with science, though? Science will look and say it's survival of the fittest. So the one who can run fastest, jump higher, the one who's the smartest, they give more value and meaning because they help the race survive, right? They're the ones that's going to help humanity survive, not the slow, not the lame, not the ones who aren't quite as intelligent. That's really what science would tell you because you're just observing it. It's just a fact. Who are you to argue with that? It doesn't give meaning to people, but when you have something that comes from outside, a supernatural, a miracle, whatever you want to call it, they can say, you know what? Man was created in the image of something else, the image of God, right? The Imago Dei. They're equal. Every person's equal. The smart, the dumb, the fast, the slow, the strong, the weak. Every person has equality because they were created in the image of something else that subverts the system. That's really important. But sorry, I digressed a little bit. I just think it's really important to know when we are talking about scientific things, sometimes we get in this mindset, science is always right, it's perfect, we need to listen to what it says, but we often forget that one, science doesn't disprove the miraculous or the supernatural because it's just observing the world as we know it. And science doesn't give meaning to things either because it's just observing the world as we know it. That's a very, very important distinction. But back to our cosmological argument. Personally, when it comes to the cosmological argument, when I like being outside, I like being in creation. It's one of the ways that I really connect with God. I love looking at the clouds, feeling the breeze, watching the sunset. Maybe that's not your thing. But when it comes to me and I look at something, let's say it's a sunset or a baby. You got a new child, everyone likes babies. You don't care what they do because they're babies. They can do whatever they want. They're just cute and we love them and they're awesome and we cuddle and they're great. When I look at something like that, I just always think like, how could you say that has no meaning? Because if you take away God, you take away the meaning, you take away the supernatural, how we got here with a purpose, and the sunset's it's just the earth turning, and your eyes have these cones and rods that are just picking up certain colors. And the emotions that you may feel in that moment are really just a bunch of atoms and molecules bouncing around, chemicals releasing in your brain that's saying, I like the colors of this, I like that scheme. But it doesn't really mean anything, it's just something that happened. I look at that and I'm like, how can you believe that has no meaning? Or when you look at like a small child and you're holding a baby and you love that baby so much and they didn't do anything to deserve it, but you do. I look at that and think, are really all the feelings that I have, the love I have, just chemicals firing? It's just something that develops in me so that, humankind could, we care for our young so that, humans will go on. Because they'll die on their own, and if I was just selfish and didn't care, they'd die. But is that really all it is, just chemicals? When I see things like that, when I feel things like that, I'm going, how can you take all the meaning away and be okay with that? Because I can't. And I don't think that makes me intellectually weak to say that. I don't think it makes me intellectually weak at all. That might be the argument. They go, well, you can't handle it. You just can't mentally handle it. So you create the idea of a God because you need to have a meaning for those feelings, but I'm more evolved. I don't need to. I'm smarter. I'm whatever it may be. The problem with that is they always want to grab meaning from somewhere else and pull it in. Right? They always want to say, well, the ultimate meaning is survival of the fittest. Why survive? Because now you're putting value on humanity, right? You're putting value on the human race over something else and saying we deserve to survive as a race. I deserve to survive as a person. Where are you getting your meaning from? Where are you grabbing that from? You can do what you want, but don't touch me, don't harm my child because, this is what matters in life. Why? I don't think it makes me weak to say I need meaning and I need it all to fit together. Because you'll dismiss the meaning, but then you'll grab it where you want it and throw away the stuff that you don't like. I like the part of God that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's really nice. I'll take that, but just throw away the rest for me because I don't really want to deal with it. I'm not saying they're purposely doing that in their mindset. That's very important to understand. I don't think people purposely go, I like this part of God and I dislike that, so I'm just going to make something up on my own. I don't think that's what's going on. But whether they realize it or not, that's what's happening. They're saying, I want the morality part because that feels really good. I want the survival part. I want the take care of yourself part because, I like being taken care of. I like surviving. I don't want to die. But just do away with the other stuff. The laws, all that. The weird stuff, the praying, the going to church, the singing, now you can keep that. I don't like that part. And when it comes to the cosmological argument, I'm able to give meaning to things. I'm able to look at the chances of the earth getting here, of the universe getting the way it is, and go like, this is outstanding. Like 1 in 10 to the 40th just for large stars? That's incredible. And then what people forget is they'll do this number and they'll say, and then the number for, the moon being in the right place and the right size is, this, and then this is this, and they forget that you got to add all these up. And then the chance of that happening, and the chance of that happening, and the chance of that happening all being compiled together, the chance of DNA being in just the right place for us to even be able to function and talk and be humans is incredible. The chances of the eye developing is incredible and being right, the way we can see this. You can discover this stuff. There's hundreds of examples of this. This is just the one I pulled out. But when you pile them together, you're going, was this really just a bunch of cogs in hands in a box that just got shooken up enough times and then all of a sudden it made a watch? Or was there someone going like this and placing it and giving value to all the parts, value to the pieces, value to the whole? That's where the real question comes into play. So that's the cosmological argument. You'll hear it. Like I said, there's a lot more than just this. Look it up. There's awesome examples. I just gave you 2 or 3 because I personally like them. I think they're cool, but there's hundreds. There's lots that we look at stuff and just go, how did this happen? So I'll end it there. If you guys have any questions, I can open that up, and if not, then we can chat amongst yourselves. I didn't give you guys the notes. I told you my brain's gone. Well, I'll tell you what, if you guys are done asking questions after a second, I can grab you some of the notes, and I'll be right back if you want to hang around for a couple minutes. But are there any questions about any of it? No? All right. Cool. Well, I'm going to turn this off, and I'll grab the notes if you want to hang around, and you guys can take them if you want. And if not, we are good to go. Thanks, guys.